I have a question for you today. Do you remember riding on a train when you were young? Do you recall the experience of sitting on a bench next to your parents and looking out of the window as you rushed past fields and houses? And most importantly, what kind of train was it? Was it a steam train? I'm here to talk about an era when these magnificent machines dominated the railways, but their days were numbered. This is the story of the last steam train. It's the year 1960, and steam trains are still the main method of transportation in Great Britain. At this point, they've been around for over 150 years, since the Stockton and Darlington Railway introduced the first passenger steam locomotive to the world back in 1825. Since then, British Railways had grown into a vast network of lines crisscrossing the country and carrying millions of passengers every day. Steam engines were the backbone of this system, chugging along the tracks from city to city, town to town, village to village, puffing out thick clouds of white steam and black smoke. But times were changing. Diesel and electric engines were becoming more popular on mainland Europe and across the pond in America. They were seen as the wave of the future, cleaner and more efficient than steam. And so it was decided that the British would follow suit. By the end of the 1950s, many of the great railway companies that had once ruled the country were now under the control of British Railways, which was nationalized in 1948. And the new management was determined to modernize the system and get rid of those old steam engines once and for all. The last steam locomotive built for British Railways was No. 6000, which came off the production line in 1951. However, some of the older engines such as the B1, B2, B4, and B5 classes continued in use until 1963 and 1964. During this period, however, major engineering works took place on the network, including the raising of level crossings and the introduction of higher axle load limits, which meant that heavier locomotives could now operate over the network. As the 1960s progressed, more and more lines were closed down due to the introduction of faster road transport. Many of the branch lines that served rural communities were among the first to go, leaving those living in remote areas without easy access to the railways. Those that remained were often faced with reduced services and older rolling stock. Despite all of this, the BR Standard Class 7 was still able to haul express passenger trains, mainly on long-distance inner-city routes. In 1964, BR announced that they would be spending less money on maintaining the existing fleet of steam engines and instead focus on diesel and electric traction. This decision effectively marked the end for many of the engines which had been in service for over 40 years. Now, running out of steam, they were withdrawn from service and sold for scrap. For many people living in Britain during this time, the decline of the steam engine was a sad affair. They had grown up with the sound of whistles and the smell of smoke in the air. To them, these machines weren't just a means of transportation, but an integral part of everyday life. When the last steam engine finally chugged its way into the sunset, there was a sense of loss felt across the country, the end of an era. For decades, steam engines had been the backbone of Britain's railway system. Their rhythmic chugging had become synonymous with travel. Their whistles a familiar sound in towns and cities across the land. But by the 1960s, they were becoming obsolete, inefficient, and smoky. With diesel and electric engines taking over, the age of steam was drawing to a close. The last steam locomotive built for British Railways was number 6000, which left the crew works in 1951. Yes, some of the older engines such as the B1, B2, B4, and B5 classes continued to run until 1963 and 1964. As the years passed, more and more lines were closed down due to the opening of new roads and the growth of private car ownership. Many of the branch lines that served rural communities were among the first to go, leaving those living in remote areas without easy access to the railways. Those that remained were often faced with reduced services and older rolling stock. Despite this, the BR Standard Class 7 was still able to haul express passenger trains, mainly on long-distance inner-city routes. In 1964, British Railways announced that they would be spending less money on maintaining the existing fleet of steam engines and instead focus on diesel and electric traction. This decision effectively marked the end for many of the engines which had been in service for over 40 years. On November 1965, a total of 200 steam locomotives were withdrawn from service. By August 1967, only 38 were left, and they were all based at Swindon, Manchester, London, Eastleigh, and Crewe. The final users of steam power were the populous rural branches out of London, the West Country, and the North West, as well as a few other locations. With diesel and electric engines slowly taking over, These steam giants were soon to meet their demise. Then came the day that would go down in history. On August 1968, the last regular scheduled steam passenger train ran from Manchester to Liverpool Street Station in London. Aboard were many people who had come to say goodbye to an era. Among them was BritishRail Chairman Sir John W. Davies and the General Secretary of the National Union of Railwaymen, Mir Jim Hoyland. When the train arrived at Liverpool Street, it was greeted by a crowd of enthusiasts and press. Some people wept openly as they said their final farewells to the beloved engines. The last steam locomotives in regular service were No. 4468 and No. 40 for 77, both LMS for cylinder for 160 to Pacifics. However, the former was withdrawn on August while the latter continued in service. For several weeks after the closure of the mainline steam locomotive overhaul facilities at Brighton, Swindon, Crewe, and Doncaster. In September 1968, the further locomotives No. 35,029 and No. 35,039 were brought out of retirement to work a special train carrying rail enthusiasts. The tour started in London on September and took in many of the famous lines that had been served by steam locomotives in the past. After returning to London, the engines were taken off the train and put on display at various stations around the city. In October 1968, the Flying Scotsman made its final run from London to York. Then, in November, the LNE B1 number 722 was used for the last time on a regular passenger train from Newcastle to Darlington. After this, it was put on display at the Science Museum in London. But the end was not yet in sight. There were still a few more trips to be made. Between December 1968 and January 1969, four engines were hired out to the industrial railways at Berryport in South Wales. These were 35,028, 35,044, 4,472, and 4,477. Meanwhile, in Scotland, 78,017 was used for shunting duties at St. Rolloch's Shed in Glasgow until March 1969. Finally, in April of that year, the last mainline steam locomotive ran in Britain. It was B1 722, which hauled a special train of empty coaching stock from Bristol to Old Oak Common in London. After the last steam engine had run, many people felt a sense of sadness and loss. The familiar sound of whistles and the smell of smoke had been a part of British life for so long that it seemed strange to imagine a railway system without them. However, it was also recognized that progress could not be denied. Diesel and electric engines were more efficient, faster, and cleaner burning. The age of steam had come to an end, but the memories of those magnificent machines would live on. Tell me, did you ride on one of these steam trains? What do you remember most about them? Perhaps it was the rhythm of their chugging wheels or the billowing clouds of smoke. Let us know in the comments below. We hope you enjoyed this nostalgia journey through the last days of steam. If you did, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more. Thank you for joining us today. Until next time, stay curious.